Hey guys, this is Mike and welcome to the Spoon Podcast. It's been a little while, but we're going to be doing these more on the regular, hopefully here in the near future. And I couldn't be happier to do that with this first guest, Poe Bronson, who heads up Indiebio, a well-known venture capital firm focused on early stage food tech and other life science companies. I first knew of Poe going back to the late 90s when he was one of the early chroniclers of the dotcom boom, writing both novels as well as nonfiction books such as News on the Late Shift. He then turned to writing books about people's careers and helping them figure out what they wanted to do with their lives. And then he eventually figured out what he wanted to do with his life, which was become essentially a venture capitalist. And we talked about both his early days and kind of how he got to where he is, but also what's going on in food tech. It's probably no surprise to you that the stiff headwinds that we've seen in the world of technology and venture capital has reached the shores of food tech. And we've also talked about some of the struggles that we've seen and some kind of the early bellwethers in alternative meat and plant-based meat, such as Beyond, and where we see things going. We also talked about what Poe is excited about in food tech and some of the companies that he's seeing in his cohort and more broadly. So it's a good overall conversation. I am excited to see Poe in Las Vegas in just a couple months. We are bringing the world of food tech to Las Vegas. The Spoon is producing CES's Food Tech Conference. So if you are interested in that, you're going to want to go to CES, the biggest technology conference probably in the world. If you want to sponsor it or you want to be involved with it, why don't you reach out to us at The Spoon? Just drop us a line at events@thespoon.tech or just go to The Spoon and click on the events page. You can learn more about it there. All right, folks, that's it for now. Let's get to my conversation with Poe. Poe, we were calling it informally the WTF Protein Edition, and then we started reminiscing about Mark Maron.
Yeah, this is the people don't know what's going on in our sector right now, and there's specific parts that they think they know, and other parts that are just sort of like WTF, like pricing a deal right now. Everybody is WTF, even if they know they like some company, they still believe it's going to work. We can go through that on the show, but between the Beyond stock, between essentially the cancellation of some factories that were going to make plant-based meat, between McDonald's pulling the McPlant, it's Michael. One of my founders, Enrique from Velos Bio, gave me this analogy this morning. I think it was pretty apropos. Imagine you're like climbing a mountaintop, like climbing up to the snow to the top of some long mountain. And it takes 7-8 years to climb up there. And one of those industry leaders kind of slips and falls and creates an avalanche. And that avalanche isn't just bad for that person. It can be bad for everyone below. And so is there an avalanche? Who's it going to hit? That is the question of our times. And every investor I talk to every day are going on about this.
Yeah, we'll talk about all that. I thought we were going to reminisce a little bit first about our favorite Mark Maron episodes, but I actually, it's funny. I was actually tweeting out earlier this week my picture with Gallagher. I actually met him at CES in I think about 6 or 7 years ago, and he was one of my favorite early episodes. But I want to properly introduce you because we kind of just jumped into it. We have on today's show Poe Bronson, who I've known of you, I think, for 25, 30 years now, because I first knew of you as an author. And so when I saw you reinvent yourself and enter the world of alternative protein, that was super. And just, I guess it's broader than alternative protein, right? But just entering what you're doing now, it was pretty exciting for me. But I have to ask you, how many people approach you and know you as Poe Bronson, the author now, versus Poe Bronson, managing director of Indiebio?
Everybody comes to me as Poe Bronson, the author.
Oh, that's still like, kind of your. That's still like how they know.
They're like, what? I have a day job as a venture capitalist. I have $9 billion of fake meat. They're like, who cares? What's your next book?
Yeah, even like these like wet behind the ears young kind of entrepreneurs who are just getting going. Like, do they know, or is it more with their parents that know?
I had one. This is about 1.5 years ago. She got on, and she's like, I saw your name on the Zoom invite. Are there two Poe Bronsons in the world? Like, and now you're here. She's like, I've read your books. She nearly started crying. Like, I had an investor last week who was like, we were an hour into the meeting when she said to me that her parents were writers too, and one of them had written a book on child development. I said, I have a book on child development. She said, which one? And I named the book for her, and her jaw dropped. She's like, I'm your biggest fan. I've been sitting with you for an hour. I've been your biggest fan for 10 years. I didn't even know this was you. That's happening all the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for those of you who are uninitiated and don't know Poe Bronson, the author, listening to the podcast, you know, Poe, you were one of, I think, the seminal early Internet 1.0 writers. Like you and Michael Lewis and a few others were writing these books. And I think you also came from a financial background, like financial industry background, like Michael, or no?
Yeah. No, yeah. I was at First Boston and Credit Suisse back in the day of that he'd written Liar's Poker. And my first novel was a book about high finance. But yeah, I was sales and trading. And hardcore, I moved $1 billion a day. I learned sales, which I still do. I would use it to sell my books. I learned money. And I learned not just money, but I learned speed around money. So in venture capital, where I am today, I've always been doing something in finance. Just most people don't ask me about it. They just ask me about my books. But I've always been doing something. But coming into venture capital now, because I'm very early stage at Indiebio, we need to make decisions fast a lot of the time. We're actually one of the most active investors in the world. And I just got to say, like, you got to have the kind of mind for feeling your way to quick decisions a lot and getting comfortable with it. And but that all started with doing sales and trading back in the day.
Yeah, and so you did that. You wrote some books. That's how I got to know you. But you found your way eventually to this industry, and now you're running Indiebio, which is part of the broader SOSV family. It's kind of the life sciences version, the wet science version. I think how Ron Shiget at one point explained it to me, the kind of more the wet lab stuff versus FoodX, which actually has been sunsetted, which was food tech, but that was more kind of like bits and bytes.
Yeah, we just kind of merged stuff into it. I mean, but through Indiebio, we ended up having one of the world's largest food tech portfolios where we're doing essentially the biology of the food itself. So not the logistics systems, but the making of the food. What is the food? What the stuff that actually goes in your mouth? That's what we tend to work on. Though we also work a lot on soil science. We also work a lot on crop science. But we have with maybe up to 45 companies now in food tech, a lot of which are very far along. Perfect Day, Upside Foods, Every Company, Notco, and the like. Sort of one of the biggest emerging food tech portfolios in the world. And we keep at it. You
guys were kind of the OG, like early one. And when I was looking though at your current cohort, which I think you're on number 13,
right?
It is much broader than food tech. I would say, I don't know, maybe 50% look like the food, but you have like
25% maybe.
Oh, really? Okay. So, and then you have you have concrete, like two concrete
companies, BioLeathers. Yeah. BioLeathers. Green ammonia for fertilizer. Like, we do a lot of material science. We still do old fashioned healthcare companies and therapeutics companies. So probably 25% of what we do is in food.
And the connective tissue between all of it is just kind of health and life sciences, like kind of the.
No. Let's just I gotta listen to this, okay? Because
I actually you tell me.
Because this is a thing. I lecture everybody. Like, the next big thing in food tech is not going to come out of the food sector. That's for sure.
Right.
And let me just talk about something like, I'll take a common thesis you and I have heard a lot the last couple of years. Common thesis is, well, these plant-based meats, they need fat. We need fat. Fat is where the flavor is. We need to control the fat, right? Okay. If where is that science on fat? It's not in food science. It's in cardiovascular system fat and what gives people heart attacks. And what lipids and how are they built and what's the difference between a triglyceride and a phospholipid. And you can make a fat cell, it's tiny, then you can load it with triglycerides. What are the enzymes that build those fatty acids or build those triglycerides, build those phospholipids. Like all that science is over there in the people who've been trying to prevent heart disease for 40 years. So the fact that we do traditional therapeutics in healthcare, the fact that I have 9, cell therapy companies means that even if we have like 5 cell-based meat companies, I still have more people working on the same type of cell on it as healthcare and therapeutics. So my knowledge base, my learning cycles about the secrets of fats or lipids and where they work and where they are inside muscle tissue is more informed by the fact that in our lab, I have food companies sitting at benches right next to, essentially, healthcare biotech companies. And so it allows us to sort of sort through some of the messaging one hears from startups, steer them a little better, but also kind of tell like what's bullshit and what's not bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the cell ag companies that are building these future food companies, UMA, for example, they were doctors. Like, it's basically people coming out of medicine who've been studying these cells for decades. They've written famous papers. Pat Brown, he was essentially a doctor. So like that's where kind of the knowledge base is coming from.
That's right. Dennis Kent of Prolific Machines, this new company that's come out of stealth that we have when we birthed it here. He had worked in biotech labs for a long number of years. He was a great scientist. He just felt like he wasn't going to make a big enough impact on the climate and our world in that sector. He wanted to move over to the cell-based meat sector where he felt like he could make a bigger impact. And it's that on a talent basis, that even just on a pure science basis, when we sort of learn to sort of remolecularize how we make food, those understandings are over there on the other side of the wall, you might say.
So let's kind of go through. I do want to talk about the status of the industry, but I just want to keep going through a little bit about your cohort because I think there's some interesting companies.
Oh, sure.
Goes in Bioworks, which is a bioleather company.
Yeah. And in bioleathers, like we did MicaWorks here, 7 years ago. And MicaWorks just signed a huge deal with General Motors. It's an amazing company. But this is a massive, massive market. Leather products are a $600 billion market. They're not as big as food, but it's big. And we think there's room for lots of winners. MicaWorks uses mycelium or fine mycelium as their product. Goes in Bioworks uses nanocellulose. It's a bacterial byproduct that comes out. Same challenge, which is to make it very, very high tensile strength, to make it tough and thin and pliable and feel like leather. So it's a different approach towards a similar kind of markets, but we think these markets are so big, there will be lots and lots of winners there. Terrific.
Ingredient. Alternative matrix animal proteins. So what is alternative matrix animal proteins?
It is, we're not telling you, Michael. It's a code word for we've discovered the one protein to control them all. By that we mean by control we mean like when you put a plant-based burger in a pan, it starts to leak stuff out. Well, if we don't want to leak it out, we can use Ingredium's protein. If we want to build a mayo in not 3 minutes for an emulsion with egg proteins, we can do it in 10 seconds with their protein.
And all at 10x less the capex than precision fermentation is what the website says. So it's a more scalable protein.
Right, but the protein itself, the actual target, it might as well just call it a code word, like MacGuffin or something, or homage to Woody Allen old movies. It could be, a recipe for, egg soup or something. Like we're not telling people what the protein is at this time, but we will be telling people over time. It's a protein that's hiding in plain sight. Most of us know about the protein. We just don't know about its secret properties. And that's why we're being careful. So we're not talking about it, but we're not trying to be cagey. We just kind of literally have to be.
And then I see Asterix Foods. It talks about, I'm seeing a recurring theme here. Culture media costs only 1/5 of microbial fermentation, precision fermentation. going towards order of magnitude lower costs is kind of a theme I'm seeing. And then also moving beyond precision fermentation 1.0.
Getting to the exact right tastes and textures with lower capex. Right now, the way we're doing precision fermentation, you have to spend a lot of money to buy these big steel tanks. So Perfect Day, this is in the press, our company Perfect Day, spent $77 million buying out of bankruptcy an Indian pharmaceutical company because they had 6 big bioreactors, each of them 160,000 liters. That's a lot of money for all that capacity, which they're going to put to good use because the company's doing awesome. But we're trying to avoid having to spend that much money just to sort of scale up your production. And so finding new ways to do that is a consistent theme across our work. Or people might think we're looking for the new magic protein. And in the one case of Ingredion, we did find one. But in other cases, it's really about getting that protein to be able to do low capex scaling. And then the other side of it is what Asterix really focuses on is glycoproteins. There's proteins, and they have exact same amino acid sequence as the natural protein. But then there's a whole of these food performance proteins. They actually, a little bit of sugar is attached by organelles in a cell to your amino acid sequence. And those little sugar chains are actually controlling how a protein folds, the structure it takes, and how it performs. And especially in food tech, a lot of what's happening is one protein needs to sort of form a matrix with another protein of one sort or another. And it's those little sugar chains that actually how one protein even recognizes the other protein, even knows it's there and knows how to conform to it and bind. So Asterix Foods are specialists in creating those exact glycans to make the proteins fold correctly.
So these are all really intensely scientifically complicated companies. So I have to ask you, Poe. I think you come from a financial background. You're obviously a smart guy. You write books, but how do you decide what is a groundbreaking, world-changing startup? Are you accessing some of your kind of experts within your cadre there? Are you kind of like, do you feel like you kind of look at a pitch, read through it and know the science is, I have to invest in this company? Like, how are you doing this?
I don't know, man. Like,
you're winging it. You're winging it as you go.
No, it's not. It's just that it's more holistic. It's like that's not actually the challenge. Like spotting things and like knowing how good a scientist they are also gives you conviction who they are as a person, how right they are, and whether this is going to work. But then there's really important value in how we're going to work together and how we're going to create an actual company out of it. Maybe the best example of this is the founders of Lipid, Jen Yu and Michelle, who Lipid, they won Future Food Tech London recently, like grand prize winner. They invented a way to turn vegan oils to perform like animal fats. They made their own product. It's this incredible bacon lardon. They also do this pork belly product with a Chinese dish called Hong Shao Rao. It just tastes amazing. It's like far and away, like just bar none, like one of the best plant-based products ever eaten. And they applied to Indiebio back in the day, not to do food at all, but to encapsulate certain microbes in cosmetic creams. Because microbes in a creams kill microbes. So they had a way to do it. And I was like, I want to fund you, but I have this idea that we could do food. So there's a lot of work between finding a scientist who's quite ingenious, and Michelle on that team is very ingenious, and try to find the right market and then the right product in that market, and then make it taste really good, and to the point that people have an emotional response to you, not just a rational response to you. So there's a lot of work, and what I look at is, how much can I work with this person, and can we go figure that out together? Can we go on a journey together? We don't have the answers right away.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of it is like identifying strong teams. So much of this is about teams. And then you kind of seeing, okay, there's a core technology here that I can think laterally about. and this could be applied to this other vertical. I imagine that's a lot of what you're working on. And I imagine also, quite honestly, your BS detector has gotten really good because you probably hear everyone probably comes in and tells you they have the miracle cure or the miracle property, and you've heard that pitch a lot. But the quality of what you guys, the pitches you get, is probably pretty higher because you guys are Indiebio. Like you guys get a lot of people coming. Or maybe you get a lot too many people coming to you, but you get a lot of quality coming to you, I think.
I hope so. I hope that founders here, we are a great place to come. But at the same time, it's just inherent in this market. The markets are extremely competitive. I mean, your average startup that would apply to Indiebio, they sent their deck to all these other big VCs. They just didn't read them. Or they didn't look at them, or just quickly noticed that was way too early. So it's not that they didn't try to go find bigger check writers in this universe. Some of them don't, but I love it when someone has said, my dream was to apply to you guys, and I'm so excited that you just called me right back. Like I finally hit the application button after 2 years, and then 10 minutes later, you're calling me. Like I can't believe this is happening. But
Pope Bronson, you're just sitting there waiting for the inbound emails with the forms, and like you're sitting by the phone calling people.
Yeah, but in reality, that's not. It's a very, very competitive world we're in, and it really, seeing the beauty in ugly ducklings is at the core what we do.
Well, how many of those you talked about? They came to us after people turned them down. I bet that's pretty gratifying to find that ugly duckling that other people didn't see the magic in and you do, and then it ends up being successful. How many of your cohort, how many people come to you and other people turn down, but you saw the brilliance in it?
I think that virtually all of what we do, also tried elsewhere in the world. But again, it's not that they couldn't see the beauty. It was that a lot of people, it's just basically, you're too early. Like you don't have enough evidence. You don't have enough proof for us to do this. Actually, like people have a good eye. They see that this could be good, but I can't touch it yet because you're essentially too early. So, I don't want to overplay this beat. Like it's, you're like, everyone is trying to survive. Everyone is trying to make good. People co-invest together. We're supporting each other. We're trying to make sure good founders get to good investors and have good outcomes. And that's true. Many times they reach out to us and they're already further along. And so it's too late for us, but we help them find good investors anyway for the stage they're at. Like it's a fairly collaborative ecosystem. And so I would say when I say this is what we do, it's kind of what we all do in a way. Even late-stage investors would say they see beauty in an ugly duckling. It's just their bar is higher.
Yeah, and you guys are very much focused on the super early stage, and that is hard work. A lot of times, like you said, the latter stage investors just said it's too early, and they'll wait till someone comes out of you. Once they kind of come out of the Indiebio program, they might be ready after they figure out what they want to be when they grow up. And you guys help people and companies figure out what they want to be in a lot of ways. Like you just said, that company that was focused on, I think you said a leather, but you said, hey, maybe we could do food.
Yeah, they were focused on a cosmetics. Nutraceutical ingredient. Yep. Yeah, it's like maybe we can do food. Yeah.
So let's segue to the WTF version or segment and talk about like what the hell is going on with alternative protein markets. We were doing a little bit of pre-chat, and I was reading the article this morning about how Beyond is probably going to do some layoffs, how their market cap has gone from like above 10 billion at the kind of at the zenith down to, I think they're below $1 billion now. And so there's a lot of doomsday talk right now, but you kind of think that like a lot of it's just wrong or wrong-headed?
No, it's just the nature of our media world, Michael, to sort of hype it up and then tear it down. Like, I'm just going to say it's very mixed messages, because as much as Beyond is having trouble, by the public reporting, Impossible sales are up 70%. Our company, Notco, its sales are up 300% this year. 300%. Perfect Day is crushing it and has the fastest growing new products in the market. Prime Roots sold out all capacity for next year.
The milk guys are doing better, though. I think the milk guys, the liquids, are doing better than the meats, I think.
Dairy has been massively disrupted to the point you can't even find good old chocolate milk in the grocery store anymore. There's just so many other things. And if it's there, you still can't even find it because you got to weed through all the other disruptions. So, yeah, dairy is massively disrupted. Meat is only minorly disrupted. That's for sure. And it helps a company like Notco, which does both a lot of dairy products as well as they have a burger. But they're doing a lot of dairy products, so it really helps drive their growth. But again, like there's a wave of new products here that are coming out. Whole cut meats that taste amazing. I mentioned lipid in their products. Like, here's the thing. Like, so take McDonald's. Like, I have nothing against McDonald's. I didn't try the McPlant. I don't know what it tastes like. But if the McPlant didn't sell enough, the number one thing my brain would go to is you didn't make it taste good enough then.
Yeah.
Like, it's your fault. It's not like the sector's fault. And like, I have products downstairs at the lab that like definitely taste good enough. So it's like you maybe went to market with the wrong product, and it's a good thing that they didn't keep it on the market because you don't want to scale your problems. Yeah,
there's enough untapped demand for people who want plant-based solutions there, and they certainly tested that thing for a long time. With regards to Impossible, I do want to see their public numbers. They're smart in that they're not going public at this point, but I do think they're reshuffling and putting Pat and focusing him on basically creating what I'm calling a SpaceX or kind of an X for food, and putting him on that I think is smart. And they're kind of moving him away from just focusing on his initial 1.0 product. What I'm wondering is, when are we going to see companies like Impossible or some company just start to roll up some of these startups and become almost like a General Motors for alternative proteins? In that, I think like a lot of them are kind of stuck on one or two hero products. But I think there's like, why isn't like Impossible rolling out a mycelium product, or why aren't they like, there's all sorts of alternatives, whole cut fungi based product. I think there's like these. We need a super company for alternative protein.
I think that's coming. And but let's just talk about how we get there. So first of all, there's been a lot of people enter this market just saying, oh, plant-based burgers are a big deal. And they're like they go out and they buy some pea or soy isolate. They buy some methylcellulose. They buy some vegetable oil. They buy an extruder. They set up a factory. And I'm sorry, you can't just print money that way. Like, these companies need to be deep tech companies. It's like we're still in the era of like maybe the iPhone 3 has launched. And you can't come along and just say, oh, to compete with the iPhone, all I got to do is take my little MP3 player and put a phone in it, or take my phone and add an MP3 chip to it, and I'll compete with the iPhone. Like, the whole idea here is that these products are supposed to get better and better and better every year. So as you described, that Impossible is trying to sort of be a SpaceX, like trying to be able to have competency in every dimension of food tech. That's the right angle to play here. And what I think we're going to see here is markets constrict. They already are constricting right now. And you're going to see a lot of companies unable to raise their next round. And they're going to offer themselves up through M&A. A lot of these conversations are already being had. And people will start, through buying of companies fairly on the cheap, they will reassemble companies that are sort of full stack. They'll have a plant-based team. They'll have precision fermentation. They may do something on the cell-based side. They might have some mycelium or yeast-based products in there in the mix. And they will essentially be deep tech, properly so, rather than trying to just make products with an extruder and some isolate.
So the great alt protein roll up is going to start to happen. Some of these companies are already talking about getting acquired. I mean, we saw Upside acquire, I think it was basically a fish product. And I think
Culture Decadence out of Wisconsin.
Culture Decadence, yep.
Yeah. Shellfish, lobster. Yeah.
So that when I saw that, I saw, hey, maybe this is the start of the sell ag kind of roll up. But that after that, I didn't see as many as I thought. But what I'm hearing from you is we're probably going to start seeing that more because, like you said, funding is actually getting a little bit harder to come by because across the board in tech, I think venture capital has gotten a little bit harder and not as easy to access.
Yeah, what's happened at VC firms, now keep in mind that a lot of VC firms were not even doing food at all. And they saw a lot of people making money in food, so they took an existing partner and they often said, hey, you're on food now too. And like, wait, I thought I'm the AI guy. And like, yeah, AI and food. Find a way that AI helps food. You'll do investments. It's like, okay. And they called like, hey, I'm doing food now. I'm like, you're doing food. I'm like, welcome to the party. So there's a lot of that going on. And then that likely will just, and then they did some investments and want to see how they do. Some people are doing great that way, and then kind of see how they do and they can pull back. But so there's a natural pullback that happens like that. And then the other side is that a lot of people still love their companies and they have a lot of confidence in their product and they want to invest in these companies. The biggest challenge right now is pricing them. So by and large, the previous several years, if there was a lead investor doing pricing of a round, everybody else would be like, great, and they pile into the round. And we are seeing now for the first time on a couple of deals, we've seen it where there is a lead. The lead has done the pricing of the shares. And the other investors who would normally pile on are sort of saying, that's a little high for us. And we didn't see that in the past. And what's going on here is that no investor wants to be the embarrassment of having priced a company at essentially, 2021 prices when it's 2022 or soon 2023. And no one really knows where the market prices are right now because of such mixed contradictory results of the underlying companies. A lot of them don't even have revenue yet. Those who have revenue, some of the revenue is coming down. Others' revenue is going up, but it's going up linearly, not like a hockey stick. And there's a few companies going up pretty fast. But people can't tell how widespread that is and what the secret ingredient is.
We're entering this era for the cell ag space, the cultivated meat space, where the big checks are going to need to be written. You've seen some of them written for Just, Eat Just, for Upside, and a few others. But those checks are going to kind of have to continue to come unless there's some like disruptive breakthrough innovation around scaling, or some kind of new kind of service provider comes up and helps kind of alleviate some of that cost buildup. But a lot of these guys have been building their pilot plants, and then they're going to build beyond the pilot plants. Are we going to have trouble, or some of these companies going to have trouble raising those checks over the next couple of years because of what's happened in the markets?
Yes. I mean, yes. And I think probably the seafood companies look in a much better position because you're competing with what is a very expensive product on the, wild caught seafood is very expensive in market prices today. So your competitive index against is a more matchable price. And so they're doing very strong. And a lot of people understand that you're really helping to solve this overfishing problem too. And so I think they're in a very, very strong position. But by and large, a lot of companies are, I'm not going to say that they're going to die or anything like that, but it's going to be harder for them. And who's going to write the big checks for them is unclear. There's been a handful of investors writing these big checks. They've made some investments now. It's not clear who's going to come off the bench and write these new checks unless you've done something fundamentally different. Prolific Machines came out of stealth a couple months ago. They've done something fundamentally different. They promise a whole different cost structure. So they're doing great. They're an example of the fact that if you really do something to change the economics of the equation, it results in a lot of interest and things are going well.
Tell us quickly for the audience about Prolific Machines and what they do.
Well, Prolific Machines was born here at Indiebio. Dennis and Max and Declan and the team were with me in the middle of the pandemic, and they had come up with an ingenious approach that we tried and it worked. But I can't tell you how they do it because we're not telling anybody how they do it. But the result of it is we've heard in cell-based sector that the growth factors cost a lot. 96% of the cost is in the growth factors. And then also things like albumin and lactoferrin and insulin also cost a lot, and they have to go in the media. Prolific machines grows cells without any growth factors. The cost isn't low, the cost is zero. They're not there. In addition, they can sort of start to replace some of the recombinant proteins you'd otherwise put in the media. So the cost profile is fundamentally different. I apologize that I can't tell you how, because that's their secret and their IP, but you can understand the economic impact. And then I think the most important thing is when the capex of building a full-scale facility, that what they're doing isn't really adding to the costs of a full-scale facility. And a lot of those costs are around food safety, if you will, preventing contamination. Mm-hmm. So their way of doing it essentially maybe even lowers costs a little bit. But we don't really know that yet.
So what I'm hearing, the companies that may be doing well beyond like certain kind of specific types of proteins because of like the consumer costs, like seafood, is we're still in this early kind of infrastructure build out. And we've talked about this before. We make the analogies to those early internet days where the 3Coms and Ciscos did well because they were the picks and axes of the internet. The picks and axes companies for the future of protein, those are the ones that may be interesting right now because they may be helping companies scale faster and creating end products. That's
not shown to be the case. So let me parse that a little bit though.
But is the company you just said, I would consider them a pick and axe company because essentially it's a scaling company, even though it's not like a bioreactor startup, right? So if we think broadly about that.
Well, we'll see if they end up having to make meat or make meat for other people or enable other people to make meat. But I do think that the concept of picks and shovels companies, it's clearly an assumption that was unproven about how willing these different companies in the sector are willing to work with you. It's been my feeling that companies are actually not that willing to work with picks and shovels companies, just not that willing to do it at all. And they kind of wanted things in-house. And by and large, it's been really hard for picks and shovels companies certainly in the cell-based space, but I would say actually in any of these spaces, any of them. Like, it's been hard for them to partner with each other or partner with any of the sort of the big guys, you might say. And that is, just like you said, like Impossible wants to create its own SpaceX inside Impossible. They don't just want to partner with companies. Like, people they're reluctant to do that.
But Impossible's like a unicorn in a sense that they're pretty unique unto themselves, right? Like they were kind of pioneer. But don't we have to move towards lower cost infrastructure? I mean, everyone just can't go and build like their own bioreactor. Like you're not going to go out and build your own automobile every time you want to be a FedEx, right? Like it just seems like it's not like a possible way forward if we're going to see 100 companies thrive in cell ag.
Well,
1,000 companies thrive.
I agree with you. And I would say I wish all these companies were better at working with picks and shovels company. I wish they were better at working with the new startup on the block. So I don't disagree with you, Michael. I'm just telling you the cold truth, which is that they answer the email and then they never set up the meeting, or they take one meeting and then they ghost you. Like, I'm just telling you this is what it's like on the ground for the companies. And, just take lipid, for example. I mentioned lipid before. They take vegan oils and make them form like animal fats. And, they went around to all the companies saying, hey, I can make these fats for you. And they're like, well, we have other people offering to make us fats. They're all really, really expensive. And they're like, no, ours is cheaper than oil. How can you be cheaper than oil? That's not possible. It's like, well, it's because our second biggest ingredient is water. And water's cheaper than oil. They're like, how do you do it? It's like, we're not going to tell you. But do you want these fats? Do you want these fats? And they really taste good and they're silky. And people didn't. They like, do a little pilot and then they wouldn't want it. So Lipid had to go out and make its own product. These companies, the picks and shovels companies, are often forced to make be product companies themselves because it's hard to be a pick or a shovel these days right now. I agree with you that it has to go that way as a mature business. We're just not there yet.
All right. So, Poe, you are constantly looking at companies. As we kind of wrap up and kind of talk about where the things are going, I'd like to hear about what you're excited about. Like, what are some interesting technologies or companies that you've seen, or relatedly, what are some technologies you'd like to see startups or some innovation areas you'd like to see more companies from?
So we've been focused really hard as a media and investors on center of the plate proteins. And we've thought to ourselves, that's where the money is, that's where the juiciness is, that's where the savoriness is, that's where the hero is. But I do believe that we've been over-focused on that. So, but let me not leave that behind yet. Let me go there in a second. But I do believe that there are new products come along. A lot of these whole-cut products built on, say, spent yeast as a feedstock, like, they're really tasty. They're really good, and much better than the mixes and other things I'd seen before. Quite a few of these companies on the market. Like, I really like that sector. It can be super affordable. And so I do believe that people just need to keep their eyes open within that center of the plate protein. But to move outside of it for a second, like we have companies like Voyage Foods and California Culture doing chocolate and doing coffee and doing peanut butters more sustainably. Like, there's so many products in the stores that we can reinvent and do better. The crop science companies, the soil microbiome companies, the entire food system, like how we get fertilizer. We have a new company doing emissions-free fertilizer in our new batch, or emissions-free ammonia specifically via electrochemistry at low energy. I think that we'd be looking more across the entire food system and not just looking at the meat, if you will.
All right. Well, Poe, as always, I enjoy talking to you for a number of reasons. One of them is it's one of my kind of I'm a longtime fan of yours, but also just kind of hearing your insights on where things are going. You certainly have your finger on kind of the most cutting edge stuff. I enjoyed visiting you, I think about a year ago almost now, where you kind of gave me some sneak peeks at some of the alternative proteins you guys are working on. So cool. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you, man. It's always great to talk to you. I love it.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.
See you, buddy.
All right, that's it. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Poe. I know I did. You can find out more about Poe Bronson pretty much anywhere on the internet, or just going to Indiebio's website, which you can find via Google. We'll be back early next week with another podcast. If you haven't already subscribed to the Spoon Podcast, please do so. We always appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.